it's July, and Georgie is with me, and it's very nice to see you, Georgie.
It's nice to see you. That was a very big exhale, Jason. That was, it's July.
It's been a long 4 months.
Yeah.
And it's...
I don't think anyone will disagree with you there.
No, and I think it is really, really lovely to see some tourism team back.
Yeah.
It really is. It's been very strange. The wildlife have loved it.
Yeah.
And
the swallows, in that they seem to be quite put out by us now, don't they?
Yeah, they're
like,
particularly disappointed that you're here. That's it's not personal. It's just that they've pretty much had the run of the place.
Yeah, they've been spoilt for the last few months, haven't they?
I think the cock pheasant that was basically ruling his nest from the centre of the courtyard has
got a bit big for his boots.
Well, I think he's departed with his tail between his legs, going, well, there's too many people here. I'm not putting up with this.
Or maybe he just had something against any specific farm members, who knows? Don't tell Stephen I said that, okay?
But it's very strange because we've been meeting with the team, like the farm team, and we've been sitting in the courtyard and having our meetings, and there's been sort of silence around and nobody around, and now you can hear the radios and you can see, customers walking backs and forwards on the drive and motorhomes coming in, and it's that's really lovely, and seeing all of you guys, but it's just it's kind of weird because there's been such a long period without that.
Yeah, and I think it's really strange as well because we are back and we are, we are running in semi-summer mode, but we're, because of coronavirus, we're not at the capacity on the campsite. This is the hostel is shut because we can't facilitate the type of conditions that are needed. So in that respect, it's a beautiful time of the year, as it would be this time last year. It's just a completely different atmosphere, isn't it? It's more like March.
Yeah, it is kind of weird, and we decided to take a slow approach to reopening. We get that other people are going faster, but we just felt this was the right thing for us and the team, and working our way through this, it's really lovely to have customers back. It really is, and we understand that some people are disappointed they can't come and stay, in the current situation, and we're working our way through that, and we're adjusting all the time, and we're watching, the rules and regs that come and things. So, but it's just lovely to have a lot more voices and faces on the site, really. And I think all of the farm team have missed it. Have missed that sense of having a whole team here, and the aspect
and
of
a big community as well. Yeah,
definitely.
I think there were obviously a lot of things that were taken into consideration. I'm sure that a lot of other campsites and all of the businesses that are along the Norfolk coast, probably in the country actually, have had to make some really tough decisions about what's best for them, their customer, their staff, and obviously their pockets. It boils down to that for a lot of people, doesn't it? But yeah, I think that we've been able to get it so that we have got a nice atmosphere, and we've got some really, really happy people on site. They're happy to be here. We're not quite in full summer mode. We're not able to have the tents, and we're not able to have every single pitch busy, and our toilets are shut as well. But it's still, the North Norfolk coast, regardless as to whether or not there's people here or what the weather's like, it's gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah, so. It is beautiful, and and the really big frustration, of course, is that the weather has been absolutely stunning until we reopened the campsite. And now it's been raining, but hey, never mind.
It's cold today. I've been wearing my fleece. I'm like, it's July. Come on.
But it's really nice that the pop-up shops at Dalegate are now back open. We're not full by any means, because some people still aren't able to kind of come down and stay locally and stuff like that, but they're opening. The shops are all reopened. Fat Face and Gone Crabbing and One Stop Nature Shop and Relish and The Hare and the Hen, they're all reopened. The Deepdale Cafe is reopened. Driftwood Glass is back, sort of doing their stuff.
Brilliant.
And of course the supermarket's been open the whole time.
Yeah,
so
they've been troopers.
That's been great. So there's some life and some livelihood kind of going on sort of locally, and of course the pubs have opened in a limited way, less capacity, but they're offering stuff. The White Horse has got its bar down next to the seawall at the bottom of the car park, and the Jolly has sort of worked out a really good way of kind of social distancing in the garden, and they've got all of their tables and stuff out, and they've been doing takeaway pizzas, and our pizza guys are back on Friday.
I know, I'm so excited to see them. They are I know that they come almost throughout the year for us, but when I see them, I'm like, we're in summer. It's good, it's summer. So I've really missed them. I've really missed the whole team, but it's nice to, I think every little flicker of normal that I get at the moment is being able to have a coffee with the team and being able to, you know, see the Wood-Fired Pizza Company and see customers walking their dog. All of those little things are just making me feel a lot less like we're in a global pandemic at the moment.
Yeah,
and
just
that's really important.
those little bits of normalness, normalise this, normalise that, while still being conscious of, you know, a lot of the team are walking around with their badges saying, you know, it's not me, I'm just social distancing. You know, it's not
I
you,
love the
I'm just
Sting
social
one.
distancing.
What's the Sting one?
Something like, don't stand so close to me. You
yeah,
know,
it's
in the words of Sting, don't yes.
Oh, so they are fun. Yeah, they're
quite fun. So we,
Brilliant.
but you know, I think. Yeah, we felt that, you know, a slow return, you know, was the best way. You know, this is not over yet. Nobody quite knows what's coming down the road to us. So we felt, you know, a step-by-step process was the best thing to do.
Yeah, and definitely, obviously, we need to be responsible about it at all times. I think for a lot of people, getting back to a sense of normalcy is really, really important. But yeah, I mean, you can't do that at the expense of everything that we've worked to protect.
Yeah. Exactly. We can't
go
from closed to fully open. It just doesn't work. You know, it doesn't.
I mean, can you imagine the staff? I'd be grey by the end of summer if we were to have done that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well.
It's a big learning curve and getting everybody back into it and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's strange. It's strange. Hello and welcome to the July Deepdale Podcast. We might cut this bit and move it to the beginning, or we might just leave it where it is, having had like a 5-minute conversation. But you know, it's really lovely to have you with us here for the July Podcast. It's great having Georgie back with me talking on here, and Nathan and I are going to do some more waxing lyrical about the thing. He's got very excited about the cover crops that have come up, and he's taken photos and stuff. We're currently blogging. Nathan and I are well, they're not blogging, we're tweeting as Ag of the World, which is a world kind of agriculture Twitter account, and different farmers do different weeks for Ag of the World. So, you know, there's been some wonderful tweets from people, you know, in deepest, darkest southern US states, you know, sort of with their massive prairie farms, and there's been people, you know, on horseback running their little ranches, and there's all sorts of stuff.
Cool.
And we're doing our week as Ag of the World. So Nathan and I have been sort of posting stuff about, you know, about the farm and, you know, what we're doing here and the reasons why we do it, and explaining some of the history of the farm and, you know, all of that kind of thing, which has been really good fun to do. So but one of the things that he's been getting excited about is, you know, the cover crops, which are really kind of beginning to come in. And by the time we get into sort of August, September time, there'll be flowers everywhere and pollinators everywhere, which would be really cool. And he was taking photos of, you know, of all the different ones all laid out, so you can see the ones with deep roots and one with shallow roots. And
he's
you know,
so wise to talk to. Don't tell him that I said this, because his head will be huge. Nathan, don't listen to this. He's one of those people that you can go to and ask any random question about any random, you know, outdoor, nature related, animal, you know, wildlife, anything, and he will know the answer, and that's really cool.
It is.
I'd love to be that type of person.
He does get, you know, if you ask him about hedges, you know, just be prepared. You know,
don't do it without a drink in your hand.
And a seat to sit down on. You know, because he knows a lot, and he loves sharing that information. So it's been fascinating, because that's the weird thing, that like the last 3 or 4 months, while, you know, the tourism team haven't been here, the farm has continued going, and which we've mentioned in previous podcasts. But it's kind of weird. It's kind of given me some time to be able to think about the future of the farm while we haven't been firefighting constantly with all the rest of the stuff. And it's so we've got, you know, all these great plans to do stewardship and go organic and, you know, all of that kind of thing, which is really exciting. And now it's sort of finding the time to sort of pass that information on, that all that information gathering that we've been doing, which is by no means ended. We, you know, every time we ask a question, it will probably
go on forever.
Every time we ask a question, it's like, okay, so that actually means that I've had an answer, but that's just meant I've got another 20 questions now. And if you can imagine, that multiplies constantly. So, you know, I feel like I know probably less now, even though I know more than I did at the beginning, because I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah, you've got more questions.
And so that's been really fascinating. But then now to sort of The really interesting for me is that we've been thinking really carefully about the relationship between conservation, the farming, and tourism, and how those three things come together, and then you add in community as well. And so that's community of the team, that's community of the local area, that's community of anybody that comes up to this area. And so you add those things together. And it was a really interesting online discussion yesterday with Zoom, talking about, sort of how we get that interconnection, because people who work in agriculture, and people who work in conservation, people who work in tourism, and there's not that much cross-pollination between those things, and so we've got to try and get much more working together. So you get examples where you've got a cafe that's open, which is clearly tourism, for being run by and for the benefit of something like the Norfolk Wildlife Trust at Cley. And so those two connect, but then there's sort of a lack of connection with the agriculture. And so it's trying to get all of them, because if we're going to succeed, and there's a really interesting thing that's been kind of come up called Wild Anglia, which is a new group who are trying to kind of encourage about 30% of the 20 to 30% of East Anglia to be wildlife friendly, wildlife areas. So that's taking out corners of your garden. It's making special arrangements on your allotment.
Does this mean that I don't have to mow my grass?
Yeah,
and
basically.
I can say that I'm supporting.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you can pledge. So you
I'm
can
cultivating.
go on.
I'm not being lazy.
It's wildanglia.co.uk, and the idea is basically that everybody, from tiniest little patch, a window box, through to sort of large estates, basically pledge to put a certain amount of their land into wildlife areas, so that we can basically create this massive carpet of wildlife friendly areas all across the east of England, so that there's a real, because then what happens is that the wildlife can really feel comfortable in those areas.
Yeah.
And then they can spread out into the other areas, so you get a much higher, although you get a peak of kind of like bumblebee population in a particular area, there's a natural sort of spreading of that wildlife out into other areas, which helps production and helps flowers in your garden and all of those kinds of things. So there's a real logic to the way you can do it, and by taking out a little bit here and a little bit there, and we're doing fairly major, we're doing sort of 60 to 70% of the farm is going into that, but if everybody did sort of 10 to 20%, the difference would be really dramatic. And they were talking about further up north, they're sort of trying to do 30% of all land, so that could be right across the county. So I think it's aiming for things like that.
And when you say you pledge land, what does that involve? Does it involve any kind of caretaking of the land, or are you just basically saying I will pledge to let this be?
I think there's various different levels, so you can kind of, so you pledge to sort of plant a wildflower border or whatever it happens to be, into things that will actively encourage wildlife. And
that's really interesting.
It's only something that we discovered about sort of last night, really, and it's weird. It got mentioned in a meeting in the afternoon, and then we met the people in the evening at another webinar. I feel there is times where I feel like I am on Zoom, like 24
You're getting
hours
a money's
a day. Yeah, jeepers. Yeah, really made that account pay for itself.
I do wonder how much reform and how many ideas are we going to look back at and go, actually, we do that now because of the coronavirus. There are things that it feels really insignificant after all of the amazing things that you were just explaining. But even things like, so now we'd never been able to take payment over the web. And I used to work on the desk taking bookings, and I know that for a lot of people and a lot of families that was far easier to do. So now we can take payment over an online booking system, which is really easy for a lot of our customers, and we've never been able to do that before. We only do that to minimise contact between our customers and our staff. So it is interesting how much change, potentially for the better, has come from coronavirus.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be. I think there will be positives that come out of this, and of course there'll be negatives, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it develops. And we're not through it yet, so we haven't a new normal hasn't yet kind of quite arrived. There's no clarity in terms of exactly when that's going to be,
what it's going to look like,
and how it's going to work, and social distancing kind of in for good, because quite frankly I'm missing them, the bear hugs from the team, and that's very sad, but at the same time, will that be back? Who knows? I think there's going to be lots of unanswered questions, and I think I think when we were deep into this, sort of in April, May time, there was a lot of like, are we, when is this ever going to finish, and how is it going to finish? And there was lots of it was hard work kind of getting through that period. And I think, a lot of people have struggled with that in the darkest sort of hours of this. And I just hope that, people are finding good places to get help with that, and and realizing that they're very far from being alone in their anxieties and their worries about this, because everybody has them. Some people are more openly talking about it, but I think it's been a really tough time to get through, massively. And I think it's highlighted all of those little niggles and all those little concerns. You've had way too much time to kind of think about those. So
I think it's important, like you mentioned earlier about the bear hugs and stuff like that. And I miss human I think it's important for people to remember it's not normal for humans to be socially distanced from each other. It's not normal for them to be isolated. We are social creatures, and I'm really lucky. I've had some dark moments, I'm sure everyone has, in the lockdown, particularly in the lockdown. I'm really lucky I've got a really good support system in my family and friends and the people that I work with. And I think it's really important for people to remember that if they don't have people that they can talk to, there are, companies, organisations, charities that can go to.
Yeah, exactly. There was some good good online resources as well. Like I sent them out to all the team, and thanks to the guys from my Goldman Sachs alumni who sent me lots of those, because just really good resources of kind of things to work through and techniques for dealing with stuff,
and
like
help
that.
you to remember that you're not alone. Helps you to remember that this is a really bizarre situation, and there's nothing wrong with you if you don't feel good about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll put some of those links in the post when we put this up on our blog. So but it's just to say, it is really lovely to see you, and it is lovely to see people. And I can see Nathan just looking through the window.
Waving at him through the window. He wanted it to be his turn, but it's not. It's mine.
But it is really nice to see you. Thank you. And,
it's really nice to see you and everyone else.
I'm hoping that all the joyous calculations to do with furloughing and all of that sort of stuff.
We're not talking about that right now.
We're
talking about nice things.
But it is really lovely to see you, Georgie, and thank you for joining me.
It's nice to be back, Jason.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Speak to you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Me, the 13th Duke of Wimbledon, here in a girls' school with my reputation. What were they thinking?
Is that one of the Fast Show ones that's been banned?
Probably now, yeah.
We were looking at
most comedy from before 5 years ago now.
We were looking at the Misfits game that we've got in the house. It possibly was before PC times, I think we can safely say. My sister is fairly horrified by what her daughter, age 3.5, 4, is looking at and thinking, I'm not sure this is suitable. So yeah, that's not good. That's good. Yeah. Anyway, hello. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much.
I can't believe it's more than a month since we recorded the last podcast.
How time flies.
I know.
It's crazy.
And there's people here now.
I know, it's weird. It's like sort of slowly returning to normality.
Yeah.
It's,
there's customers and there's, noisy tourism team, and, we love them, but they are, in comparison to the quietness of you, me, Stephen and Estelle, it's quite noisy.
We've been pacing softly around the place like monks, and all of a sudden, the tourism team are back, and it's just, it's a racket, but it's beautiful.
A beautiful racket.
Beautiful racket.
Sorry, we're both drinking cups of tea, in case you're wondering what on earth the sort of slurping and noises are.
That.
But it was, it's necessary. Caffeine is vital, yes, it's a legal drug. We're taking it.
Yes.
So what have you been up to today?
I have been walking around a field, and I have been in the middle of a field. I've been walking around a field because we are surveying all of the hedgerows that we have on the farm at the moment, which amounts to several miles worth.
Yes, many miles.
Many miles.
Many tens of miles.
In conclusion, some miles. And we're looking at those hedgerows, and what we're looking at doing over the next couple of years is a fairly big restoration program on the hedgerows. And it's a case of looking at the hedge and sussing out what do we think that we could do to help it to recover. And that leaves us with a few different options, one of which is, so one thing that we're doing is we're relaxing the cutting regime on the hedges. So we're cutting them less often, and when we do, we're being careful about how we cut them, and we're letting them grow out a bit and bush out a bit. Because our hedgerows on the farm have been cut, a lot of them to sort of the same height for quite a long time, and they've basically been over trimmed. So we're just relaxing a bit and letting them sort of get a bit of bush on and grow out. And where that's not sufficient, we will then be replanting gaps with new plants to basically flesh out those gaps in the hedgerows. And we will also be coppicing some of the plants. So with coppicing, you can do it with a tree, or you can do it with a hedging plant. You cut it right down to the ground, and with most of our native broadleaf species, they grow up from the bottom again. They recover, and actually it can rejuvenate the plant. For example, there's a lime tree at Westernburt Arboretum, and it is estimated to be comfortably in excess of 1,000 years old. And the only reason that it's basically lived that long is because it's been continuously coppiced for several years. And you go expecting to see this gigantic tree, and actually what you see is a clump of new regrowth. So this is something that we'll be doing for our hedging plants, is cut them down to the ground, or we'll be doing some hedge laying. So we'll be putting a cut most of the way through the stem of the hedging plant, and then laying those plants down so that we get nice thick bushy growth at the base. Because as long as you don't cut all the way through the stem of the plant, you actually allow the sap to continue to flow up the plant. It carries on growing, so it's awesome.
Quite cool, isn't it, really?
It's very, very cool. We're going to be doing a bunch of different stuff, and essentially it's a case of looking where there's a gap in a hedgerow, where the hedgerow is looking a bit sickly, to suss out what we can do for each bit. So there's been that, and
standing in the middle of fields wondering if we're ever going to harvest, bearing in mind it's raining and everything's still pretty green. Yeah,
standing in the middle of a field, sussing out when we're going to harvest our wheat. So we think there's a book
being kept at the moment,
Yeah, we think possibly Stephen on our team thinks the 5th of August.
He's the only one that's really put his hat in the ring on a particular date.
Yeah, I'm not committing at the moment, but it's obviously not going to be any time in the next couple of weeks, I think. The wheat is still green a bit.
It's pretty green in places.
But it's starting to turn.
Yeah.
And so we're we're all keeping an eye on it, because when the wheat has turned that nice golden colour, and when we believe that we've got roughly sort of the right moisture content in it, then we want to be cracking on and harvesting. And then it's all hands to the pump. So there's that. And then the other reason I was standing in a field today is because I was checking out one of our cover crops and digging up some really lovely, healthy looking specimens of some of these cover crop plants that we've got going on. So we've talked about those before.
We have. But it's nice seeing them actually in it, because they were sort of, last time we talked about it and we got quite excited about cover crops, and I think we actually apologised when we posted the blog with the link for the podcast about the fact that probably got overexcited for two middle-aged men with beards, but it is really nice. That was kind of theoretical then, because the seed was in the ground but there wasn't very much to show for it, and now there's proper cover crops up, and not that long away there'll be flowers, and there'll be really excited insects who are going, oh, this is so great.
Exactly. We've got some of the mustard is flowering already, so we've got some little yellow flowers appearing on the field, and when the phacelia is coming up, it'll be hopefully a bee fest. What's really great to see is that I dug a couple of the pea plants. So one of the plants that we've got in the cover crop is a pea, and you can see on the roots of the pea, you can see the little nodules where that's literally nitrogen that pea has fixed. So you can actually see it doing its job. So that's absolutely brilliant to see.
And then hopefully and we're working on this plan. For those who think we're moving towards what they describe as low or no till. And that effectively means that rather than getting a big heavy plough in and chewing everything up and turning over all the soil, which you see, and it makes it look very smart, but ours is going to be messier on purpose because we want those roots to hold the soil together. And when we saw the water racing off the field in February, March time, that was because there was no content to that soil. And the idea is that all of these different cover crops, their roots kind of intertwine and make a really good kind of net to hold that thing together. And so the idea is when we go to plant whatever we plant next, and that's on Nathan and I's list at the moment, is that we do as little as possible to that ground to allow the new crop to grow, but without disturbing the crop that's there. That's the idea. And hopefully then, those, as the peas die off because they've been disturbed and sort of mildly mown or whatever, then other plants will be able to pick up on the nitrogen that they've fixed in the ground. So then we don't have to add our own nitrogen and so on and so forth. And so the process as we move to organic will be that we stop all of these chemicals being added to the soil, and we plant the right things to put the right things in the soil for what's coming next, and that's the idea. So you will the look of Deepdale Farm when you looking back at it from the harbour or from the seawall or whatever will be very different going forward, because it will just look different, and hopefully there'll be many more insects, and there'll be things feeding on those, and there'll be things feeding on those, and so on and so forth. So the idea is that you build up that thing, and we are very aware that there's a lot of farmers who go, oh no, but there's a lot of farmers now that do go, oh yeah, that's lovely. So we're going to be we're going to be in the middle of that, and looking forward to it. But we think the experience for those coming here will be so much greater, and the experience for our team managing that will be so much greater, which is kind of the idea, really. And fingers crossed, there'll be things like barley growing, and which we can have malted and turned into Deepdale beer, which would be very exciting. There's
just so excited about what's coming up, and we can't wait to talk with people about what it is that we're doing and about all the changes we've got coming up. And it's been fantastic today. I've been walking through the edge of one of our potato fields, looking at our hedges, looking at a lovely thick, sort of slightly unusual, an elm hedge, a wych elm hedge. And as I've been walking along, I suddenly realised that practically every step I took, I could see a ladybird. And and it's brilliant that we've got these natural predators are already basically there, ready to crack on and help us out. And so the way that we will be farming more in the future is by providing a lot more in terms of habitat and food for predatory species like ladybirds, who will basically go off and do some pest control for us. We're sort of basically getting nature on side. There are some sort of big changes on the way, and we don't exactly know what the destination looks like at the moment.
What we do know is that there's massive changes coming ahead for farming, and we've decided we're going to take a particular route which we think will work for us, and we know that lots of other people will take lots of other routes, and we're trying to find a future for the farm while working in harmony with the tourism, the conservation, and the community. And we're sort of that idea has sort of been developing over the last 6-7 months, hasn't it, since you started? And to be fair, we had been talking about it for a long time before that, and so
a few years,
and so it's been something that's been a thing. But what we found is that now we're getting into networks of people who are looking at regenerative agriculture, at conservation and stuff like that, that they are helping us realise that what we're doing is not insane. That's the great thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we've over the past 6 months or so, I have lost count of the number of conversations that we've had with a really, really big range of people. Farmers who have basically been farming organic for several years, who have been practicing regenerative agriculture, who've been making more space for wildlife, farmers who are transitioning into organic and who are who are a little bit further along the journey than us, as well as organisations that we've been talking with, like Norfolk Rivers Trust and the Norfolk Farming Wildlife Advisory Group. There are so many people who have a sort of an incredible amount of knowledge and who have been so happy to share what they know and to encourage us. And we've sort of felt like, I think, it's for me, it's felt a little bit like we've been sort of had a bunch of people with us, with our arms in their hands in the small of our backs, basically gently shoving and sort of going, yeah, go on, it's okay.
Yeah.
And the things that we're talking about doing, more wildlife, more bees, more birds, more sustainable methods for growing crops, fewer chemical inputs. On the face of it, there's nothing bad about any of this, and we are going to have issues to deal with. This is a very new way of farming. For this farm, it's a complete change to the way that that this farm has been sort of managed so far. We will have new issues to deal with, like management of certain weeds and how we actually feed the crops that we have in the ground and the way that we rotate the crops. New challenges to think about, but they're really, really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is really lovely to chat with you, mate. And it's lovely to have Georgie back involved with the podcast. And it's just, and it is lovely to sort of see things beginning to awaken, but in a slow but steady way, so that we don't go from sort of nothing to madness. Hopefully it will be a calm, steady transition going forward, and sort of see. But for anybody who's coming to the North Norfolk coast in the next little while, you will see some big changes at Deepdale, and hopefully in the not too distant future we'll be able to welcome people in a way that we can actually tell them about what we're doing and show them around and explain what we're going to be doing. So fingers crossed, and lovely to chat with you again, mate. And we will keep posting. Keep an eye on our posts that we put on regularly on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. And enjoy Ag of the World. Some fascinating farmers. We are really honoured to be part of Ag of the World, because the other guys who are posting, there's some really inspirational farmers on there, who are posting some really fascinating stuff, and quite frankly, we're both really chuffed that we are part of that bigger network of people all over the world. And
it's been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun, and I think the nice thing is it's got us to talk about things that we know in our back of our minds, but we've been thinking, what could we post about thing? And then, so you post a whole lot of stuff about hedgerows, and I did some stuff about the flooding and that sort of stuff, which is all really interesting history of Deepdale, but isn't necessarily stuff that we've had time to write down before, so it's been good. But it just, the fact that it's run by this lovely lady who rides around on a horse and runs a ranch, it's so different from here. And then you see these amazing prairie farm guys who are out with this massive machinery and working out all of these really interesting ways of doing things. But we came across it because it was talking about stuff that we were fascinated by. So to be part of that now is just really exciting.
So that is Twitter, Ag of the World on Twitter.
Yes.
So
watch it. We're almost finished, so we'll go to the end of this week.
Yeah.
But you'll be able to look back at our posts, and we're reposting a lot of the stuff as on our own Twitter feed. But really worth, if you've got the slightest interest in how food is grown and where and how and by whom, you should follow that Twitter account, Ag of the World. It's really interesting, and there's some just fabulous stuff. I love the stuff that's been posted on there. It's really interesting.
There are another fantastic account I want to big up as well is Farmers of the UK. So that also is sort of guest posts from various different farmers in this country, and it is incredible to see what farmers are getting up to, all the various different activities that farmers at different scales are doing, and all the interest and all the sort of basically the preparations for whatever's coming in the future.
Yeah, No, it's good. Cheers, man. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
soon, and it won't be long before it's August, and we're doing another podcast, and we might be able to do it from the side of the field while we're harvesting. You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, be quite cool. You'll be your first harvest.
Awesome.
Cheers, guys. See you.